Life is like a bicycle. To keep your balance, you have to keep moving. Albert Einstein. Well, hey there. Welcome to the Retirement Answer Man Show. My name is Roger Whitney. I am your host. This is the show dedicated to helping you not just survive retirement. Blah. We are here to help you have the confidence to lean in and rock retirement. And it's definitely about the money, but it's about so much more. Wow, I'm getting excited. We're a few days before Christmas. In my world, that's a big deal. Hopefully you're having a great holiday season. On deck today, we have a few things. Number one, I want to talk about passion and how to find it. This can become an issue when you're thinking about or in retirement, especially early retirement. And then secondly, we're going to answer some of your questions, which we love to do. Before we do those two things, though, I want to remind you of what's starting on January 4th, I guess it is, 2023. We're starting our next Retirement Plan Live, which is a case study. So for those of you that aren't familiar with this structure, every year we do a case study with a listener where they agree to come onto the show and walk through step-by-step creating a feasible plan of record, going through what their values are, what their goals are, what their resources are, what they're excited about, what they're worried about. And you get to listen in to this person and I having the conversations to walk this process together. And this year, we're going to have Rosie, who is married to Dwayne, and they've been married for a little over a year. They don't have a pension, and they have moderate financial assets. So they're somewhat constrained when they were going into retirement. And lo and behold, they retired and they had a bear market and they had assets that went from just over $1 million to about $750,000. And they're a year in and they're wondering, are they still okay? We're going to examine this of what happens if you retire in a bear market and all of a sudden your assets perhaps were a little bit more aggressive than they should have been. And now you've lost a bunch of money. At this level anyway, what do you do next? And so we're going to have this conversation with Rosie. And then in early February, we're going to have a live meetup, webinar, whatever you want to call it, where you can come on and have me demonstrate and walk through the feasible plan of record. So Rosie and I will be there, and you'll be able to watch as I share with her for the first time her feasible plan of record. And you'll be able to ask questions, and I'll try to answer them, and you'll get a sense for how this process can work. And then that same night, we'll be opening up the Rock Retirement Club for our open enrollment. That will be early February, I think the first Thursday in February. So I'm excited about that. Even if that's not of interest to you club-wise, this is going to be a great case study because it's going to be much more real. Man, retiring in a bear market can be a beast. With that, let's take a moment and talk about how to rock life outside of the financial realm. The other day, I spoke with somebody who was holding off on retiring, and they said it wasn't because of the money, but they were worried about what they were actually going to do if they weren't working. They felt like they would be adrift with nothing to do, and so why quit? In addition to that, they're in the highest earning years of their life. It's a bear market, and even though they want to leave work, they're worried about what would they do. And also like, if I work a little bit more, I'm going to make a lot more money and get through this bear market. So it must be safer if I just opt to what I've already done. And so I wanted to talk about how to find passion and how to find a purpose after retirement. But before I do that, I want to talk about one thing related to this, because this issue was framed in the conversation. I'm not retiring because I don't know what I will do. That was what it was framed at. But then they went on, as you noticed, talking about I'm making a lot of money, it's a bad market, etc. And it's important when you tell yourself these scripts that you identify what the true issue is. There's an old saying, it's never the thing, but it's the thing about the thing. I don't know what the thing is for this person, but I would intuit that it might not be about not having an idea of what I'm going to do that is holding them back. It could be simply some worry about the markets and the money side of things, even though they know intellectually that they will be okay. They've done the math, they've done the retirement plan of record and all of that. And the numbers say, the black and white says, you're fine. And so now they have a straw man of sorts. Well, I really don't know what I'm going to do, so I'm just going to work. But when it's really about the confidence, I'm not saying it's this person, but I have noticed that a lot. I've noticed that so much that at one point in my office, and I think I got rid of them, I bought these little straw men on a stick. So when I was in a meeting with someone and they were telling me the thing, not the thing about the thing that was bothering them or that they were excited about, I would hold up the straw man and challenge them a little bit as to whether that was really the reason or whether there was something underneath. And I'm not saying that about this person, but it can be that way a lot. Let's assume it's not in this case. You're working, you're the master of your domain, even though you're ready for something else. You're likely making more money than you're ever going to make, and it's a bad market. It's easy just to keep going, especially if you don't have a vision for what your passion or interests are going to be if you were to leave work. Leaving work is intimidating full-time. It's exciting for sure, but it's intimidating because you basically blow up all of the daily, weekly, quarterly structures of your life, annual structures of your life. All the rhythms that you've become accustomed to over decades are gone. If you think about it, most of these rhythms began when you started to go to school, in that you had a place to be, you knew what class you were supposed to go to, you had a reward system built in terms of grades and accolades, you had friends that you are people you would interact with throughout the day in these different courses, and then at the end of the year you would graduate. You would get vacation. This started in preschool and went to college and then went into a career. When you retire, all of that goes away. And we never actually acknowledge that as succinctly as we're talking about it here. When you retire, you don't have a regular place you have to be. You don't have any place you have to go. You don't have natural relationships that are people you're going to bump into at the office or in the classroom. You don't have the annual review. You don't get the raise. You don't get the awards. You don't get to feel like I have this mastered. And having something mastered that you feel competent in and you know how life is going to work is very comforting. And the idea of going into the unknown where there's no structure is very intimidating. And so it's easy to think that we have to find what our passion will be before we actually take the leap. I don't think that's the way to do it. The more you can know what you're retiring to, I think the healthier it can be. But we all can't do that. Sometimes we just got to jump and figure it out. And I was having this discussion today with a number of people that have already gone through this. And here are some insights on this journey of how do you find what to do? What's your passion going to be? One is you're not going to find it by journaling, or you're not going to find it by putting it on a whiteboard. You may be able to brainstorm ideas. Finding what you're supposed to be doing every day that excites you is really an action. You got to keep moving. You got to keep riding that bicycle. If you just stop, you're going to fall over and it's harder to get going again. So finding that passion is going to be something that you're just going to have to do. When we talk about what is the purpose of my life outside of work, it's easy to think about changing the world, writing the book, these huge world-changing things. It doesn't have to be. It could literally be a great grandparent, a great parent, a great friend. It doesn't have to be some of the grandiose things that a lot of us talk about, for sure. So don't put pressure that it has to be something that other people are going to be impressed with. It doesn't. One of the words that came up in this group discussion that we were having was the word dabble. Someone that had already retired, maybe I think they were 4 or 5 years into retirement, they said, be a dabbler. Be a dabbler. I like that word, dabble, dabble, dabble. That's a fun word to say. I can pronounce it. That's always a plus. So what is a dabbler? I looked it up online. It says one not deeply engaged in or concerned with something. That doesn't sound like passion to me, does it? But if you dabble, you discover. But you have to dabble in order to discover. This makes me think back to myself and my children, and usually it's the age of 5 to 13 or 14. I think of my daughter. Soccer, she was in baseball, she was in gymnastics, she was in art class, she was into music for a while, then she was into drawing and then tattoos. She dabbled in a lot of things, just like I did. And at that age, what they're doing is they're testing things. They're experimenting, and they have some interest in dance for a little bit. So they go to some dance classes, and it never really takes hold because they get a different interest that is in gymnastics. So they go do that for a while. But eventually, by dabbling, you start to create some little mini passions, and you quit 99% of them. But over time, you will find one or maybe two that you lean into a little bit more. When I started this podcast, it came from dabbling. I was doing some YouTube, I was doing some writing, I was doing some social media, but when I dabbled into podcasting, I'm like, oh, this is it. And then I just started to lean into it and develop the passion. So I want to encourage you, my friend, to don't worry too much about what your passion is going to be if you're not retired. And if you are retired, I want to encourage you to dabble. And then just lean towards the things that capture your interest and say, it's okay if I quit. No biggie. So if you are in pre-retirement like this person, what can you do to set yourself up so you have some structure? And my suggestion would be, is one, you're going to have a detox. Give yourself some time to detox when you leave work. So phase one, I've quit work and I have no schedule. Phase one is detox. Don't worry about having a schedule. Just get all the stress and the angst flushed out of your system. It took my wife a couple months for this when she retired. And then two, create an ideal day so you have a routine to fall into. You can do this during detox. You can do it afterwards. I get up at 7 a.m. and then I work out in the mornings, and then I go take care of household tasks, and then I go out to see so-and-so. Create in detail the structure of a great morning and a great evening. You would call that the AM bookend and the PM bookend. Because if you can master those, well, one, if you master the PM bookend, that makes you master the AM bookend. That sets you up for success. So if you can create a day, say by 10 o'clock, that regardless of what happens after 10 o'clock, you've had a great day, that's pretty good. Like for me right now, I'm working. It is a great day for me as I get up at 5:30, I meditate, I journal, I stretch, I exercise, and then I do 2.5 hours of deep work. If I do that, it gets to around 10 o'clock, and doesn't really matter. If I do that, I've had a great day, even if everything else just goes crazy. Create a version of that for yourself so you have some structure, because we are used to structure. And then lastly, talk to current retirees about their experience and what they've done to discover things. And then just go dabble, take an art class, go to a wood shop. They have these open creative zones where they have all the tools you need to do all sorts of things. Just start dabbling, not feeling like you have to hold on to something, and eventually you're going to find your purpose or your passion. All right, with that, let's go on and answer some of your questions. Time for your questions. If you have a question for the show, go to rogerwhitney.com/Ask Roger. And you can type in your question or leave an audio question. We'll be doing questions pretty much every single week. So would love to hear from you because this show is about you. Our first question comes from Susie regarding rental property and divorce. She says, hey, Roger, only recently found your podcast. So far, it's been amazing. We'll try to keep that up, Susan. I'm in my 60s trying to wrap up a divorce for the last 7 years. It was a bifurcated divorce, but the finances are not done. I have a primary home. And she says, that is if the judge does not order us to have it sold. The question I have is around one of the rentals that we have, which is worth $4 million. At my age, I'm just not sure if I should take a $2 million loan to buy my husband out. I don't think I'll have to pay alimony at this point. The property needs about $500,000 of work, but once it's done, it has wonderful potential. Right now, the property is in the negative, but once repaired, it would be much higher, as well as can be a short-term rental. I really hate to lose it or sell it. Taxes alone would be $1 million plus fees. I'm a real estate broker, but I don't think the judge will let me be the agent if we decide to sell it. And so she says, I've been thinking about this for a while now. I just can't decide. Maybe I thought you would share your thoughts on this. Thanks again for all you do. Okay, Susie. We got a divorce and all of this is happening, but the question before the house is, I have this rental property. Doesn't really matter what the numbers are. It's worth $4 million. In order to keep it, you feel that you would have to take a $2 million loan in order to pay off your ex-husband's equity in the house. So we're going to use that as the fact set. Got a big picture here. So you have to start at the beginning, Susie, And although this divorce has been going on for 7 years, I'm guessing that mentally and psychologically you've separated. You just have kept this financial stuff. So I'm going to make that assumption. You really do want to start with, I'm in my 60s. What do I want my life to look like? What is it I want from here as I recreate and build my 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s lifestyle for myself? What journey do I want to go on? This is critical to the answer of this question, Susie, because you likely have multiple pathways that you can take. One of them including perhaps doing the loan and getting this rental property or this fairly substantial property. But just because that might be a great path in terms of if you put in more money and you sell it or you keep it, it's going to be worth a lot more. Just because financially it has a lot of potential and it's your sweet spot, given that you're in real estate, doesn't necessarily mean it's the right path for Susie for where Susie is. An example, I am 55. I like to swim. I like to ride my bike. I could probably run again. I'm a little bit older. I have some issues in running. I could do an Ironman. I aspire in some ways to doing an Ironman again, which is 2.5 mile swim, 112 mile bike ride, and then a marathon. That's an Ironman. I did one back in 2008. I'm like, oh, I could do that again. I've done this before. I'm an athletic person, but I have chosen that I don't want to go down the pathway that would require me to accomplish that. I'm through with that. Yes, I could do it and I have the ability and somewhat of the interest, but I just don't want to do all the work that it would take for me to complete another Ironman. You're very successful in real estate. You have been for years. You have the opportunity in this property that you see that you could accomplish something. The question before the house for you, Susie, is do I want to walk this journey? Even though I know it would be really cool at the end, in this case, financially. Is it a journey you want to walk in your 60s? While you're recreating your life, that's going to come down to a personal choice. And I've had clients that were identical on paper, but they had different priorities. If you get an understanding of what you want your life to look like, that's going to make this decision a lot easier, Susie. From a quantitative perspective, it's going to come down to what other assets do you have? Is this a small portion of a much larger net worth for you on your own? To whereas your exposure to this valuable property and a $2 million loan, could that put your liquidity in jeopardy and your cash flow in jeopardy? And if it goes sideways, could it put your security in retirement or this later stage of life in jeopardy? I don't have any of that information. If you're worth 30 million or 40 million, and this is just, hey, I take a $2 million loan for this $4 million property, then you got a lot more slack to manage it. And again, these numbers are big, but this applies to anybody. It doesn't matter how many zeros are at the end. Is this going to be placing a big bet on your financial future on this property? If it is, I would be very careful before doing it. If it's not, if I do that $2 million loan and all I do is get out without losing my shirt, I'm still going to be okay. Or even if I take a big hit, I'm still going to be okay. Then you're playing with house money in some ways. The fact that you say the property is negative right now is a red flag because there's no guarantee that it's going to be green after the repairs. And in real estate right now, we're in, I call it the playing chicken phase of real estate, in that markets are shifting because interest rates have risen. So the cost to borrow is a lot more expensive, and that changes the value of everything or the perceived value of everything. And so real estate values are in flux, and it's in California. It sounds like an amazing property, but even California can have booms and busts. And I don't know where we're at on that. So we're not in the gravy state. The key here, Susie, is really to know what is it you want your life to look like? Because this sounds like it would be a project house. You'd have the repairs, you'd have all the logistics of the financing, you'd have taxes, you'd have to manage getting all those repairs done, and then you'd have perhaps short-term leasing obligations because you're going to be a landlady of some sort. That's a lot of logistics. That's not a one-time decision. That's a decision that's going to create this cascade of obligations for years to come, potentially. Do you want that? That's really what it comes down to. And what exposure are you putting to your life as a result of this pathway? Because an alternate pathway is you guys sell everything. You're extremely liquid and you can recreate your life the way that you want with fresh eyes, not being trapped by the past. Those are my thoughts on that, Susie. I'd be interested to hear how this goes. So definitely check in with us on what you decide and how it's going. Our next question comes from Richard regarding the widow's Social Security limit. How is a widow's limit part of a decision to turn on Social Security? How should I consider when to turn on Social Security that would impact on my spouse? If I start before 70, does that affect the surviving spouse's benefit? So as an example, I'm 69. If I start it now, my monthly payment from Social Security is $3,680, but at age 70, by waiting a year, it goes to $4,237. Pretty straightforward here, Richard, in that if you were to delay to age 70 and get the $4,237 a month, and then subsequently were to pass away, your widow, assuming they were the lower earner, would step up to your benefit for the remainder of their life. And that benefit would be adjusted by COLA, or cost of living adjustments, inflation. If you were to start it at age 69 and you got the $3,680 a month, you'd start at a lower base. That base would continue to increase based on the COLA adjustments or inflation adjustments. And if you were to pass, your widow would step up to whatever benefit you had. So in this case, if you were to wait a year, your surviving spouse would have a higher benefit in the event that you passed, assuming they were the lower earner, for the rest of their life. So there could be some value in maximizing that. And a lot of times when you're thinking about Social Security, the old way that we used to look at it is, where is the crossover point? At what point in my age progression do I break even from one to the other? A more modern way of looking at it is about maximizing this lifelong annuity that increases by inflation, which is Social Security, not just for myself, but for both parties in the event that there is a spouse involved. So in this answer, it probably would make sense to wait if that's what you want to focus on. And I think that's an important thing to focus on. So I would like that strategy. Our next question comes from Kevin related to Social Security claiming plus these COLA adjustment that we just talked about. So let's listen to Kevin's question.
Hi, Roger. This is Kevin, a longtime listener to the podcast. I had a question about Social Security. I'm currently 68 and I'm deferring Social Security to 70, looking forward to those 8% increases per year. In figuring out what my Social Security will be, this year, will it be going up 8% based on my deferring plus the additional 8.7% for COLA? Wanted to be sure I'm understanding this right. Thank you very much.
Thanks for the question, Kevin. The short answer, Kevin, is yes. If you are delaying Social Security and you're past full retirement age, your new estimated benefit is going to be the product of the deferral credit that you're receiving plus the COLA adjustment that's happening this year. So in your example, if you assume it's an 8% deferral credit plus an 8.7% COLA credit, your estimated new payment next year will be a combination of those two products as it's applied to your primary insurance amount. Now, the Social Security Administration cautions that there are some additional complexities around rounding and offsets, etc. And the Social Security Administration has a website, I think it's ssa.gov/OAC/COLA. You can find some more information about that. But essentially, you are correct. Our next question comes from a younger listener. Always cool to have younger listeners listening to us. Regarding should they forego their 401k contribution? I don't see the name here. So my situation is that I've always been a compulsive saver. I opened up a Roth when I was 18, a 401k when I was 21. My 401k vastly outperformed my Roth. And when my single income new family budget came around, I stopped contributing to the Roth, no regrets. I am now 36 years old, have $900,000 in my 401k, and I feel like all of my accounts had performed really well. And I'm just summarizing that. He says, to sum it up, I feel overfunded for this stage of my life. My question is there ever a point where one should forfeit a 401k employer match? My company matches 50% match up to 6% of the employee contribution. At some point, I expect a regression to the mean and more average returns than the outsized returns that I've had. Is there a better use of money than just simply saving it in my 401k? A couple other relevant facts that this person shared is that their wife recently started working and effectively doubled their salary. Well, first, congratulations on building such an amazing nest egg and being a compulsive saver. Well, the compulsive part might not be always great, but having that saving muscle of self-denial to save for the future is going to pay off for you literally later in life. Now you're 36 years old. First off, the concept of are you overfunded for this stage of life? I don't think of that concept with where you're at. It all depends on what you're actually trying to accomplish. Every year, you want to consider, what do I do with my excess income? So let's put the 401k match aside for a second. So we're coming into 2023. Your wife just started working, or your husband, I don't actually know. Calculate what your excess earnings are, meaning how much do you earn? How much do you receive after taxes? How much do you need to live the life of you two? The difference between that is your excess earnings. That is wealth that you have created that is not needed to fund your lifestyle. So we want to know how much is on the table of excess money relative to the lifestyle you want to live next year. That's the question before the house. And I think we went through this same type of structure a week ago. Let's assume that that is $100,000. You have $100,000 in excess income that you got to figure out what to do with. Don't count any of the current stuff that you're doing savings-wise. That is essentially wealth that you've created. This is how you create wealth. You earn through your efforts, you cover your overhead, and the excess is profit, which you get to decide what to do with. And there's 5 things you can do with this excess income. You do it in a business just like you do it in a household. Number 1, you mentioned this in your comments, you could overcome some frugality and maybe spend a little bit of that $100,000 to enhance your current life in some way. Maybe it's experiences, maybe it's trips, maybe it's new furniture. You could spend it. That's option 1. Option 2 is you could give it away. You could tithe it to your church. You could give it to a charity. Help others out. Option 3 is you could take some of that and pay down some debt, which will, in theory, save you interest costs and perhaps if you pay off debt, enhance your cash flow, which will generate even more wealth. So that could be a compounding effect, right? So that's the third thing you could do. The fourth thing you can do is save it as cash, meaning that I don't really know what to do with it. So rather than make a decision, I'm going to save it as cash reserves and I'll figure it out later on. And then you can just be efficient in what you put it in to earn interest. That is a value. You don't have to make a decision right now. You can just save it as cash. The last option is you could invest it. You could get that money to work to try to create more wealth over a long period of time by compounding, which you've done in your 401k. Your decision is going to be one or some combination of those 5. Perhaps you spend a little bit, perhaps you pay off a little bit of debt and you save the rest and you invest a little bit as well. It can be one of them. It could be some combination. You and your spouse are going to need to navigate what that is. Given that they just went back to work, maybe it's we spend a little bit to have someone do the yard or maybe clean the house because that decreases friction in our life now that we're both busy outside the house. That might be option. When you get to the amount that you want to invest, if any amount, let's say of that $100,000, you say, I want to invest $50,000. Now that has its own decision tree. First off, what tax category do I want to save it in? After tax, pre-tax, which is what you've been doing, or Roth? Or what combination of those 3 from a tax category standpoint? And then from there, what specific things do I want to invest it in? Real estate, stocks, bonds, whatever your jam is. I would go through that hierarchy, and that will help you easily figure this out. Now, when you assume you have this $50,000 in excess capital that you want to invest, well, one guaranteed return is if you at least contribute to get the maximum amount of the match, you have a guaranteed return because you're getting free money from your employer. That's pretty attractive because that's a bird in the hand. I don't know if I would necessarily avoid doing that. And you could potentially do that if you have a Roth option in your 401k, or if your spouse has a Roth option in their 401k, you could do tax-free plus get a match that goes to the tax deferred. But I would think of this in hierarchies rather than should I stop my 401k or not? And I wouldn't think in terms of I'm overfunded at 36. You're in the wealth accumulation stage. And this is a habit you don't want to get out of. This is a habit that will serve you well, especially now that you have the second income. You don't want your life to inflate by that income because now you've set a new bar of what it's going to cost to live the life of you. So hopefully that gives you some framework for how to approach this topic. With that, let's move on and set a smart sprint.
On your marks, get set.
And we're off to set a little baby step we can take in the next 7 days to not just rock retirement, but rock life. All right, in the next 7 days, I want you to dabble with something. Dabble with it. I am going to dabble with practicing golf, not playing golf, but actually practicing. I bought this little system that has a training program to increase my swing speed. In my mind, I'm thinking, okay, I play golf with my wife. We do it once a week. It's a lot of fun. I go out with the guys maybe once or twice a week, and we have a guys or month or once or twice a year. And we have a guys trip, which is golf. And I'm always the worst golfer on that trip. Maybe I make this a hobby of something I just do every day, and I actually learn to enjoy practicing it. I'm going to dabble with that. Do I know if it's going to stick? No, I don't. Maybe at the end of the day, I don't want to go down the pathway of becoming a better golfer, and I'm just happy where I'm at. So I'm going to dabble with that. What are you going to dabble with? Okay, we're getting ready for the holidays. Well, we are in the midst of the holidays. My wife just had her birthday, 29 again. And we're going to be going to her family's house for Christmas, which we always do. It's going to be a newer Christmas for us because one of our kids works on Christmas Eve and one of them works on Christmas Day. And so we're not going to have our own little family Christmas in our house because our kids are off being adults. And so this is a little bit of a transitionary period for Shauna and I. We were acknowledging that the other day, so that'll be interesting. Whatever you're doing, I hope you have a great time. Happy holidays. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance reference is historical and does not guarantee future results. All indices are unmanaged and cannot be invested in directly. Make sure you consult your legal, tax, or financial advisor before making any decisions.